Wow, I see my daughter's dentist is online. Okay, well, why don't we get started? So we're here to discuss a packet that you should have gotten, hopefully, in the mail by now, and that contained the restated bylaws and the restated CCNRs that the board has been working on now for a few years to get this out, and we've been working with our HOA attorney, John Hanson, who is also online. He's going to be here to kind of walk us through a little bit and let us know why we had to update these bylaws and restate these documents, a little bit about what may have changed inside with the content, and then answer any questions that you may have if you've had a chance to go through and go through the documents. The ballot that you should have got is in two parts. There's one part to approve the restated documents, and then there's another part in there that had to do with our appendix in the original documents, the ones that we're looking to modify now. And that had to do with assessments are made, how our HOA dues are paid, how special assessments are calculated. In the past, it was always in a format where the original founders of the documents put it together. And they did sort of a weighted way of doing it, where the bigger units had more of a financial responsibility. The smaller units had lesser responsibility. And then it was kind of commensurate with also voting rights too. It also kind of went along those lines. And people were talking, and a proposal was made to go ahead and maybe even this out, to go ahead and create where it's even, where one vote is equal to one vote, regardless of what unit type that people were in. And then also how the HOA was calculated, in terms that we wouldn't do it in a weighted fashion, but it would be spread out evenly across our membership in our HOA, not dependent upon unit size. So that's also a consideration on the ballot. In the package, there was an appendix that was also created inside to kind of show the calculations of how it's done today versus how it might be if you approved the ballot in terms of what the alternate language was looking like. So anyway, let's let John take a stab at this and kind of walk us through the documents that we're looking at, why we're here, and why we're doing this. John, if you can, take it away.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And again, my name is John Hanson. Our law firm by Dolan and Jacobson represents homeowner associations as the entirety of our practice. And part of our practice is restating and rewriting associations governing documents. And we represent associations throughout the state of California. I have many clients in the Tahoe area and familiar with how your type of development operates, the nature of your area, the challenges you face. And so we have a lot of experience in doing what we're doing right now with this process, with updating your governing documents. The process that you're going through is a process that most associations go through about every 15 to 20 years or so. You're about at year 12 since your last governing document update was done. And so you're about that time when it's a normal course to update your governing documents. And also, you've gone through some changes and learned some things over the years about how your development operates, that it makes sense to fine-tune and clarify a few things. The process to update governing documents is to take your existing set of documents and do a complete restatement. With how fast the law changes in California regarding HOAs, within a few years, the language in documents is generally obsolete. So much has changed. It's not so much that it's obsolete, that the principles still aren't the same, but the nuances, the little details are so different that to update the documents, you can't do a red line where you go through and you pick apart things. You have to go through and restate everything. Additionally, different law firms do things differently, and over the years, law firms may change the style of how they write CC&Rs and bylaws. So, for example, your documents are written by a law firm in San Francisco with an attorney named Andy Serkin. He has a very particular way that he writes CC&Rs and bylaws. It is not my personal preference on how some of those provisions are written. So We do it differently. We have a different way of writing that we find to be more clear, to be easier to understand, to be easier to follow. So it is a brand new set of CC&Rs and bylaws that you're looking at. It's not simply taking the existing ones and just rewriting certain provisions. With that said, the stuff that applies to you on a daily basis, like the use restrictions for things like pets, rentals, parking, maintenance, a lot of that is carried over into the new document. So a lot of the same general ideas about use and maintenance still apply. All the use restrictions are now located in Article 4. All the maintenance is now located in Article 8. So those still principles still get carried over. It's just now been clarified. So we'll start first with the bylaws. The bylaws aren't that exciting, but they do make a difference for how your operations work. The bylaws are your corporate governance document. It deals with the corporate activities of the association, things like voting, meetings, the board of directors, how elections are held, the corporate structure. This is the document that gets outdated the fastest because the law is constantly changing regarding HOA elections, regarding director qualifications, voting rights. All of that gets changed every couple of years in California. So you have a whole new set of bylaws. All the changes, except a couple, are driven purely by the law. So things like how much notice there is before a board meeting, how elections are to be conducted, the board member qualifications. That's all driven by the law. There's a couple updates, though, to clarify and to modify how a few things are done with elections and with the board. So the first thing is cumulative voting is being removed. Cumulative voting is a complicated system of voting where you can quote unquote stack votes. So right now in your current bylaws, every director is up for election every year. So you serve 1-year terms. So you have five seats up for election every year. That means you have 5 votes. In cumulative voting, you can take those 5 votes and you can stack them on a couple candidates. So instead, you could vote 5 votes for 5 candidates, 1 vote for each, or you could put 3 votes on one candidate and 2 votes on another. That's how cumulative voting works. It's a complicated system of voting because it's not always clear how you do it. Not everyone always understands it. And then the reverse is that if a director were ever to be recalled, you have to use a formula called reverse cumulative voting, which actually makes it very, very hard to remove a director. So it takes power away from the members and keeps board members in place that may have been voted on cumulatively. The other wrinkle with your bylaws is your CC&Rs state that you have weighted voting, like Jeff explained. The power of your vote is based upon the size of your unit. The bylaws aren't totally clear on that issue, but the law says the CC&Rs control over the bylaws. So right now, cumulative voting with your weighted votes would be a very odd system of voting. What the new bylaws do is go to a straight 1 vote for every seat on the board and 1 vote for every unit. No more weighted voting. So everybody gets 1 vote, regardless of the size of your unit. And in director elections, you vote 1 vote for each seat. You can't stack votes onto 1 director. The other change happening in the bylaws is that the board positions will go from 1-year terms to 2-year terms. So when a director is elected, they'll serve for 2 years. And in order to have some continuity on the board will go to a staggered term of how the board seats are elected each year. So 3 directors will be elected in 1 year, and then 2 directors will be elected in the alternate year. That again allows that continuity that you don't have a whole board turnover every year and have brand new directors who haven't been on. You have at least some institutional knowledge being carried over year to year. And board members are serving for 2 years, so you have a longer time to get into a rhythm with the association, to learn how it operates, and then to be more informed and more experienced on managing the affairs of the association as you get into that 2nd year. So those are the big changes in the bylaws. Simplifying the voting, giving everyone 1 vote per unit, and then board members are going to 2-year terms instead of 1-year terms. The CC&Rs are again a lot of updates for the law. So clarifying your language about assessments, about easements, about the board's rights for enforcement, adding in a little more due process for certain things. So for example, right now in your CC&Rs, if an owner failed to maintain their unit, which is not that common in condos, but if an owner failed to maintain, then the association can just go do the work. It doesn't say what process has to be followed before that could happen. So you wouldn't get any notice necessarily in advance. The association could just go through your door and start repairing your carpet. Under the new CC&Rs, you have to get 30 days notice if you have a maintenance issue inside your unit, which again is pretty rare. And then you get called to a hearing first, and you get lots of notice and opportunities to fix things before the association would do it. So adding a lot more of those due process elements, which conforms with the law. Article 4, again, is generally the same regarding use restrictions. Some things have been cleaned up and clarified, like, some rules about pets having to be on leashes, and some language about, clarifying that a nuisance can also be a noise, which was sort of in there already, but it wasn't that clear in your current CC&Rs. Article 8 has had a fair amount of updates to address things your CC&Rs don't. So your current CC&Rs have a definition for utilities, and it's defined as, pipes, wires, the type of things you'd commonly think of as utilities. But it doesn't say who maintains them. It says you have an easement for utilities for a pipe to run through your unit or to run next to your neighbor's unit, but it doesn't say who maintains which portions of the pipes, which portions of the wires, all of that. So what we're defining in the new CC&Rs is that if a utility line is either A, in your unit, or B, is in the common area, i.e. in the walls, but exclusively serves your unit, that's your obligation to maintain. That was sort of assumed already in the current CC&Rs because that's an exclusive use component that's only serving your unit, but it wasn't clearly defined. Fireplaces and chimneys is a common thing that's left out of CC&Rs. I'm not really sure why, but a lot of developers and their lawyers just leave it out. No one thinks about that. But when you're in a community where, first of all, you don't know if the fireplace is part of your unit or not, and second of all, more importantly, when you have fire safety issues, knowing who's responsible for that chimney and that flue is very important. So under the new documents, as a homeowner, you're responsible for the repair of the chimney flue, which is the part that goes up out of your fireplace, but the association will maintain it. So things like cleaning to make sure it's fire safe. Association maintains the chimney, so the outside structure, but you maintain you repair the actual flue itself. So dividing that maintenance gives clarity so that you as a homeowner know what your obligations are, and know what the obligations of the association are. And then there's a few more clarifications about, again, what happens if owners fail to maintain. There's a more detailed process for architectural changes, which is not that common in condominiums. But if you're doing things like changing out your floor covering that could affect the structural integrity of a unit, or you're moving a wall, or you're relocating a pipe, you're changing out a window, things that can have an impact on the structure, there's a more detailed process to go through so that you know what you need to do and the board knows what it needs to do. And then finally, as we mentioned before, there is the assessments. So currently your assessments are a weighted assessment system, like Jeff mentioned, based upon your square footage. So those with larger units pay more, those with smaller units pay less. And as mentioned in the cover letter that you got, reasonable minds can differ as to whether that's a fair system or not. It's not, I would say it's not the majority of condos use a weighted system for assessments. Most do a straight assessment based upon an equal allocation amongst all units. Some condo projects do have weighted systems, but they're complicated and it's not always a fair system. The idea is that if you have a bigger unit, you have a greater benefit you receive from exterior maintenance, from insurance, things like that, but that's not necessarily the case. You could have a big unit, but not necessarily get the most benefit from the association as someone with a smaller unit who may have water leaks or tenants who require more work, or a variety of other topics, or a different exposure on the side of the building. So this is the idea is, well, members will have a choice how you want to do this. The way the CCNRs are currently, the proposed CCNRs are currently written, assessments will stay the same. It'll be a weighted system of assessments based upon square footage. But then you'll have a part B, or a second part vote, to vote for or against changing that to an equal allocation amongst all units. So the baseline vote is keeping assessments the same and approving everything else. And the secondary vote must be approved by a majority to change the assessment structure to an equal allocation amongst all units. You have a secret ballot process, a secret ballot in your hand that you'll be able to return whenever you're ready. There should be a deadline in that, and that deadline may be extended if we don't get enough ballots back fast enough. And at least 64, well, members representing 64 units must vote in favor of these documents in order for them to pass. And that representing 64 units is important because that's based upon the weighted voting. So the way the weighted voting works is some units have a vote greater than 1. So however many owners that is going to depend on how that weighted voting works. But the idea is that a majority of all the condominium interests in the development will have to vote in favor of these documents in order for them to pass. One final comment, and then I'll stop for any questions. The insurance language has all stayed the same. Insurance has been a very important topic for you all, and I know a very stressful topic for you. That insurance language is staying the same. The only two clarifications is the law requires fidelity insurance, which is insurance for your money. You have to buy that as a matter of law, so that's in there now. And then the insurance that owners are all required to maintain, more definition is included in there to help owners better understand exactly what they need to buy. So the obligations are no different. It's just been clarified a bit more so that way you and then your insurance broker or insurance agent will know what kind of policy you need to buy for what's called an HO6 policy. So I'll stop there after all that, and I'm ready to answer any questions that you may have.
Let's just, if you do have a question, go ahead and under the reactions at the bottom, there's a raise hand feature. So if you go ahead and raise your hand, we'll unmute you and let you ask that question. Okay, Becky, go ahead. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Becky Imperi LaForge. Quick question for you. So what is the percent voting participation that has to be met in order for these bylaws to be approved?
It's a good question. So it's not really a quorum because your quorum is 1/3 of the members, but you need at least owners. You need owners representing at least 64 condominiums voting in favor. That's not necessarily 64 owners voting in favor. It's owners representing 64 condominiums. So right now, with your weighted voting structure, the owners who own a condominium that has a vote share of more than 1, there are 44 total. If those 44 have the equivalent of 65.94 condominium interest shares. So it's going to kind of depend how many people vote.
How many shares are there total?
127.
127, so it's like 50, 51, it's a little over 50%. Now, my question is do the new articles or bylaws contemplate a change in that voting percentage requirement for acceptance of changes?
Yes, good question. Going forward, amending the CC&Rs, if the new documents are approved, amending the CC&Rs requires approval of a majority of all, you say that exactly the right way. It's a approval of 51% of the members would have to approve the CC&Rs going forward. and everyone gets one vote. So going forward, it will be a straight 64 members must approve versus members representing 64 condos under the current CCNRs.
Okay, so
So
it's not a huge change, but it's a slight change. Okay.
yeah, it under the new system, it gives more power to the owners of smaller units, is the idea.
Gotcha. I first of all, you guys did a lot of work on wholesale rewrites of these documents. So your verbal update of sort of the A/B comparison, given the absence of a red line, which I think would be pretty messy on these things, almost impossible, was really helpful to hear. Based on your verbal input, is that the full extent of the sort of the major changes that you see? There's no other sort of voting right changes, other items like that we should be aware of?
Well, it's about 65 pages of text.
Yeah, I know it's
so
a very general question, so I don't mean to pin you down, but
yeah, I have a pretty good memory, but I'm not perfect, so I can't promise you that I've touched on every single change that's been made. I think I picked up all the big ones, and I just went through them all again before we got on this call. Okay. So I feel pretty comfortable. If I could think of anything else, I would have told you.
I noticed, so what was the changes to pets? What was the, I have a particular concern. I mean, first of all, I'm a dog lover, but I've personally saved about 3 people from being attacked by dogs in the condominium complex by dogs off leash. Is it no longer now a requirement to have that, or was that so vague in the original CCNRs that you guys rewrote that?
Well, it wasn't vague, but it's one paragraph that's about one sentence that goes on for 12 lines. So we broke it up a little more to make it clear. You still need to have dogs on leashes, so that's not changed.
Okay.
You're still responsible for your pets. You're limited to 2 dogs or cats, and you can't tether your dogs outside the common area. So you couldn't like tie your dog to a tree and leave it. I think that's probably.
What about on decks, leaving dogs on decks and parking dogs and all that?
Well, it's a good question. If it was an enclosed deck, that is technically the common area, and if it were a barking dog, it'd be a nuisance. So that would still, nothing's really changed there.
Okay, good. Okay, that's helpful. Anything else?
Hi. Hello?
Yes.
Is the insurance based on square footage?
The insurance cost right now is charged based on square footage. So yes, that's one of the items that's broken up into that assessment allocation.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and then the next person doesn't have a name on their screen, but it's SST. So if you can go ahead and unmute yourself, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, guys. Somebody made a comment. It would have been nice to have a red line because the changes are I don't know how significant they are, but they're extensive, and it's hard to know what's been changed without actually seeing a side by side. But at this point, that's a comment. One issue that we're interested in is short-term rentals. I read the provision on subleasing, and it's not a paradigm of clarity. Is the intention there that short-term rentals will still be permitted, or is the rule going to change?
Nothing's changing on that.
Okay. In respect to the changes with respect to the assessment and voting, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I read the documents, if we approve the 2 documents, then the voting rights shift to the one vote, one member. And then we get to separately decide whether we want to change the assessment formula or not. Did I have that got that backwards, or that's the way I read it?
Yes, you have that correct.
Okay. I guess my question with respect to the assessments is, why was this why was this necessary? Or I mean, what was behind this? Is this a best practices thing, or I mean, what was the reason for the change?
Well, it's a good question. It was a combination of things. First was some homeowners approached the board and brought the idea up to say, you know, why am I paying more than the person next to me? We don't have any different benefits. You know, we all have the same roof, we all have the same structure. You know, we all get the same opportunity for things, but we don't necessarily all receive the same benefits, because just because I have a bigger unit doesn't mean I necessarily get more value from the association than someone with a small unit who might require more time from the management team, may have more insurance claims because they have more tenants who break things, or water leaks because they have bad pipes. So the idea was, this current system may not be fair. It may not be equitable, and some homeowners were concerned about it, but the board didn't want to make the decision, we're just going to give owners one option. The board said, well, reasonable minds can differ on this. Let's come up with two options, let the homeowners decide what they want to do on it. And I would say on the whole, most of my clients that are condos, either they have an equal allocation on assessments, or they don't break all the charges out by square footage. They may say, okay, insurance and maintenance is by square footage, but everything else, you know, accounting, legal, management, all the soft costs are going to be uniform. You guys are based on square footage for all the costs, which is not necessarily the fairest way to do it, but it could be. It just, there's different ways to look at it.
Okay, well, I mean, your suggestion, which is to split it out in costs that are allocated based on square footage, like insurance, maybe should be allocated. Maybe the cost should be allocated that way. I mean, otherwise, I guess, I mean, as the owner of a small unit, I guess, I mean, it's hard to get too excited about this change. I understand that the owners of the larger units, you know, will benefit, but I mean, it's going to cost me a couple $100 a month more. You know, if this rule change becomes effective, and that's just a comment, not a question.
Yeah,
but that's all I had.
All right.
How much-
Thank you. And then next, we're gonna have Mark Hill. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Mark. All right, let's skip to Mark until he can get that figured out, and let's go ahead and go to Mimi Wentz. Go ahead, Mimi. You'll need to unmute yourself.
There we go.
Hello, can you hear me? Can
yes,
you
go
hear
ahead.
us? Okay. I'm Mimi's husband. So we own a 2-bedroom unit. And my concern is under Exhibit A, there are a number of paragraphs that tend to be very biased for the change and to eliminate the differentiation between smaller units and bigger units. So if I can go through each of the paragraphs and highlight those.
Go ahead.
There's no paragraphs on Exhibit A. Exhibit A is just a chart. So are you looking at something else? I want to make sure I know what you're looking at.
It says in the papers we received, there's a attachment A that talks about the proposed change and the current method of assessment. And then 2 pages before, it says Exhibit A, describing the schedule of assessment allocation. And then it goes through a number of hypotheticals that are very biased towards the bigger units and the change to doing it that way. And I'd like to talk about those.
Sure, go ahead.
So in the first paragraph, it says, that a small unit has a $50,000 water repair and the larger unit never has insurable loss. How can anyone come up with that idea? The water repair on a large unit is more likely to be bigger than on a small unit. There are more floors, more facilities. So that hypothetical is inaccurate. Exteriors, I was sitting on our deck today. The 3-story across from us is at least 33% bigger than ours, and therefore has much more exposure. Plus, any work that it needed to be done is much more likely to be expensive due to height. Next paragraph, soft costs. Small unit with a noisy tenant. Why is that even chosen? A larger unit's more likely to have multiple families and more noisy people just because there are more people in the unit. So why pick on, in a sense, the small unit being noisy? Makes no sense. Cost of water is another cost. And again, the smaller unit, if they take 2 showers, they're projected to use much more water than a big unit. That is antithetical to the reality of a big unit versus a small one. And then at the last paragraph, Ferris method, how can a big unit potentially more likely holding more people be less expensive to potentially deal with than a small unit? It just makes no sense. So obviously, I'm advocating that we stay with the current system that differentiates assessments based on size of units. And I'd be glad to clarify anything I just said.
No, I understood it all. I think it was clear. So thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Gene, go ahead.
Hi. I'm Gene Schleicher. I live in 5054 Gold Bend, and we've owned our condominium since 1989, so I'm pretty familiar with most of the things there. I read through the documents, and it seems like the things are a little backwards there. I have not big dog in this fight because, $8 a month is not a significant increase in premium for me because we have 2 bedrooms, 2 bath unit. But what seems to be backwards is the fact that the founding documents were based on the fact that larger units will have actually more costs associated with them. And because of that, they gave them more voting rights. And nobody's ever objected to the voting rights. That was that. But now what we're trying to do is say that the voting rights somehow are equal to the assessment, and they aren't. The reason that, as I said, the assessment came in first because we have the costs, and the costs are the insurance premiums. Some lady before me asked about the insurance costs. It's not the insurance repair costs, it's the insurance premiums, and they're based on the square footage of the units. In addition to that, the water bill is more likely to be consumed by more people who are more likely to occupy a larger unit. In addition to that, we have the resurfacing that we just went through, and the larger units will have more surface to restore for them, and so on and so forth. So I don't think that doing it based on okay, let's trade the fact that we are giving you more voting rights and we are relieving you, but you also will have to pay more for your voting rights, is equitable.
Okay,
That's
Thank
just my point.
thank you.
All right, thanks, Gene. Lynn Crumman, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, Lynn Crumman. Thanks for the opportunity to have this town hall. I just wanted to clarify, John, something I think you said earlier. So under the current voting system where votes are not equitably distributed, we need 64 in favor. And I think of the 54 larger units, 60, they will carry 69 votes. Is that right?
Well, based on my math, the 44 owners of the larger units carry the equivalent of 65 votes.
So in the Schedule A, 3 beds, 4 beds, 4311, that's 54. But even by your math, it still carries the majority, carries the necessary numbers of votes. So I'm kind of wondering about, you know, the voting on this, because it seems like the people have the most to benefit from reduced dues already have the ability to move this through. So it seems a little bit lopsided.
Well, that's the way the documents are set up. So we're just following what the documents are. But that's
Yeah,
also
I understand, but I think
Yeah.
everybody should
Sure.
have the same understanding.
Yeah. So a very good point. But the other assumption is that they're all going to actually vote. And in my experience in HOAs, and frankly in America, people just don't vote. So you'd have to have 100% turnout of all of those larger unit owners, and they all have to agree on something, which getting 44 people to all vote and agree is a big undertaking. So I would not expect that group would carry the day on the election. I suspect that it's going to be whoever shows up, whoever returns their ballots.
Hard to argue with that.
What's that?
I said, it's
Oh.
hard to argue with that, right? But I think we should all just kind of understand the basic mechanics of it.
Yeah.
And I like, I think it was Gene, have a small dog in this fight because it's $8 a month for me, but I think there's others that stand bigger changes, right? And so I think it's important that that be transparent to people.
Yeah, and that's why the board didn't want to make a decision one way or the other on it and just put it in the vote of the members and let the members decide the issue.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Okay, go ahead, Colette.
Hi, quick question that I think one of the previous owners brought up a good point, John, that I would love for you to expound on, because this was something that we did discuss as we were updating this. And it was the point that you made as well about how there could be a structure where, you know, certain costs are based on the size of a unit and certain costs were equal among all units. Can you kind of dive deeper? Because those were conversations that we had and why we chose to make it equal across all units rather than splitting it up. And actually kind of, sorry, what the pros and cons or benefits and drawbacks would be of that scenario.
Yeah, it's difficult in some of my communities where they have some costs go to a variable allocation and some costs go to a fixed allocation. It becomes difficult administratively. So management's going to have to come up with these different spreadsheets for how the assessments are broken out. And then deciding what goes into the variable versus what goes into the fixed assessment component is in another set of arguments about equity and fairness. And again, you get into well, who gets the most benefit from management? Who gets the most benefit from even accounting? The person who doesn't pay their assessments has a lot more time spent on them than the person who does pay their assessments. So it gets a little bit murky to decide what's the fairest way to do it. So I don't think there's any perfect way. And I'm not going to tell you one way is more fair than the other. Again, it depends on how things work out. How does the maintenance work out? How does the losses work out? You know, how does the use of management time work out? It all kind of comes down to a case by case basis. And then of course, we don't know exactly how costs are going to be done a particular year. So the board decided, let's go with two clean models. The current model where it's 100% variable assessment, every single cost goes into a variable assessment, or it's 100% equal. Those are two clean ways to do it, and it gives two clean choices. The other issue too is if we threw out a third choice, you can't get to a majority vote. So if we had vote for or against uniform, for or against variable, or for or against hybrid, you need at least 64 condominiums representations voting for one of those. And so you're going to have a split vote that you're not going to get any of them getting a majority approval. So the board had to break it down to just give two choices. That way there could be a majority vote on one of them. And again, having to get over that 64 mark or get to that 64 mark in order for it to pass. So with 3 votes, it simply would be too hard to pick one.
Got it. Thank you. And thank you for all your time you've spent with the board on updating this. I know it's been a slog, and for your time here on the town hall to be able to answer all the homeowners' questions. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
I have a question. How much is each unit paying for insurance? So 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom? And also, how much is a 1, 2, 3, or 4 using water?
That's
So
outside of my.
as far as water goes, water is being charged on a per unit basis, and that's something that's set by NCSD. So there's a fixed cost, and then there's a water usage cost. So the fixed cost is posted on the NCSD website, and it is on a per unit basis. They used to do it by meter size, but the membership spoke up, and they made that change within the last 3 years. And then as far as the insurance question, it's based on the current allocation now. So you're paying based on your assessment factor for the association.
And that doesn't quite answer my question. So if, as the attorney said earlier, that the insurance cost varies based on square footage, then there is a 1 bedroom is charged this, and 2 bedroom, etc. Correct?
I had to do that, huh?
So I'm not sure I understand your question, but if the associations, let's just say with round numbers, if the association's invoice for insurance was $1,000 and you have a 2 bedroom, 1 bath, your assessment factor is 69% of that. So you're gonna pay $69 of that. And then if you have a 4 bedroom, you're gonna pay 1.38% of that. So you'll pay a larger amount. Is that right, John? For round, just using round numbers.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at here is that it's more expensive, and what is the number? How much more expensive is a 1 bedroom versus a 4 bedroom?
Yeah, Catherine, I don't think that it's billed that way. I think that we don't get an itemized bill based upon the units or the unit size. I think they take into account the entire square footage of the entire place, everything all involved, and then we get a bill submitted. Eric, is that
Yes.
correct?
Correct, Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could do the math and divide that, right? I mean,
Yeah, you theoretically could break down the budget into how each component goes into your individual assessment rate and figure out what the insurance component is of your assessment rate. It doesn't sound like Eric has that number handy, because that would be a sub ledger that would further break down the general ledger and breakdown of the assessment charges. But suffice it to say that a 2 bedroom is paying half of what a smaller 2 bedroom is paying half of what a 4 bedroom pays. So a 2-1 pays essentially 1/2 of what a 4 bedroom pays.
right, based on the square footage, right?
Yes.
Yes, so that's what I was talking about. And for water, just back to that. So there's, each unit is equal? Is that what you're saying, Eric?
That rate is set up by NCSD and that's posted on their website. But yes, you're correct. It's set up for on a per unit basis. They set that rate.
And then there's an overage charge, is that correct?
A consumption charge. And
Okay,
that's
and
not
that
per unit either.
consumption-
That's just on the property as a whole.
So it's not broken down. What is the consumption? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, they charge a consumption rate based on the number of meters in the property within Gold Bend and bill that out to Gold Bend. There's no way to differentiate or sub-meter how much one unit is using compared to another unit.
Okay.
That is not in place.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That's it for me.
And
Mark,
sorry,
it looks
sorry,
like-
just to chime in here real quick, because I think Catherine brings up a lot of good questions that we all talked about insurance and looking at how insurance gets billed. And I think it's important. Obviously, insurance has been a big thing for our community over the last couple of years, but I think it's important also to keep in mind that our insurance package for Gold Bend also includes workman's comp, general liability, many things that and I'm not advocating either way. I think it's just important to remember that insurance isn't just damages or water leaks, that it's a lot of other coverage as well.
All right, Mark, you got yourself unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I also put it in a comment or a chat thing. Generally speaking, in this state, we have a lot of law changes. It seems like almost every year. Some of them are pretty minor about governance and things, but there's almost certainly going to be some big ones on fire and insurance and who knows what else. Our legislature is pretty active in all the housing areas. And I'm sort of wondering why we only get around to conforming our rules and bylaws and CCNRs only every 12 years or something to those. It seems like we should be at least getting something from the attorney firm or the board or some association that kind of keeps the membership aware of, okay, these are the things that the state has done that now affects us. In some cases, it means our bylaws and CCNRs are in opposition to that, and clearly the state law, I think, would supplant those, and yet we don't even know. So I'm wondering, is there a process for letting us know, at least the board, and then hopefully the membership as well, especially if we have to have a collective decision about how we're going to comply. So I'm just wondering if there's some process, at least annual, to bring us up to date and possibly change anything that has to be changed.
Yeah, those are good questions. One thing I'll say about the board is the board actually started this process in 2020. When your documents are only 8 years old, it just takes a long time to get through this process. Updating CCNRs and bylaws is surprisingly laborious because of all the reading and comparing and debating and discussing. So the process was started in 2020, so pretty quick. Most communities will go decades without updating their CCNRs and bylaws. Going forward, two things to keep in mind. One is the new CCNRs and bylaws will allow the board to do amendments to conform to the law without member approval. So if the law changes, the board can go in there and tinker without doing this whole process like we're doing today. Under your current governing documents, if you want to change a period, you got to get member approval on it. So the board will have a little more latitude to keep your documents relevant going forward. Second of all, as far as legal updates go, there's not a great way to do that without recommending my competitors. Some law firms do newsletters that you can subscribe to. I don't always agree with some of them, so take those with a grain of salt. But there are those kinds of sources. There are organizations for homeowners and homeowner associations that you can subscribe to get legal updates from. ECHO is one organization. It's the Executive Council of Homeowners. You can sign up for those kinds of things. Your community manager Eric goes to legal forums every year and comes back and gives the board guidance on changes in the law. So that does get filtered down to the board. Getting it out to the homeowners, it's a good idea to do. I think there's probably some ways to do it. Sometimes the law changes aren't that exciting. Like last year, the law changed about storing election materials from 2 years to 1 year. I mean, no one's going to care about how long you keep envelopes, but that was a change in the law. It took a lot to get there. So there are some things, you're right, we could probably do some communications on that. Our firm does send out legal updates to all of our clients as well. We send them directly to boards. We don't send them to homeowners directly, but that could be something also that the board could share with members. So yeah, well, good points all around.
Okay, and then Steve, you've got your hand up as well. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, everybody. I had to join late, so I really apologize if this was already covered, but would it be possible to get like a Word document or something that reflects like red lines on changes from the previous CCRs versus now to like truly be able to see what's been modified, or comparison doc?
Yeah, I had a whole 5-minute speech on that. You missed it.
Okay.
So it's okay. The short answer is no. I'm sorry. I wish I could. I took your old CCNRs and carried over the relevant sections about like, who maintains the storage closets and who, where parking is and how pets are handled. So the relevant stuff has been carried over into Articles 4 and 8, but the rest of the language is all completely rewritten. A red line would be big sections of red and then big sections of new underlined text. Just that your current CCNRs and bylaws, they're just really, they're not great. They're old, they're outdated.
Okay.
A lot of the laws changed. So unfortunately, we can't give you a red line. I wish I could, but there's just too many differences.
Got it.
Eric, is there anybody else or is that it?
I'm not seeing any more. It looks like Perry and Becky's hand just went up. Go ahead.
The only, based on that last question, the only thing I'd say is I think John did a good job summarizing sort of the changes. So while a red line would be just an utter mess, I think he did a decent job going through sort of verbally the A/B comparison. So you might look back on this video.
Oh, that's right. It's recorded. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
Mark, go ahead. He's muted again.
Okay, I want to just make a general comment on the fee change or the assessments. Even though I'm a small guy, I kind of agree with the regular assessments being a flat fee. I think it kind of more or less balances out. My concern is with big special assessments like we did for the windows, where I have 4 little windows and other people probably have 8. I'd rather not subsidize their 8 wonderful windows if we get another thing like that, a structural change that's very expensive. Most things won't be like that, but I'd rather have the board have the option on those kinds of special assessments to propose a different than flat funding thing. Otherwise, I think you're going to get a lot of no votes on stuff like that when people realize they're not getting proportional benefit. So, and I think the windows, unfortunately, may be coming. I mean, so many of us have had problems with them. I don't know how long we're going to just live with those problems and keep replacing glass and stuff, but I know I have a faulty insert of glass in one, and I've already had 2 replaced, I think. So so that one might be coming. The other thing that might be coming, and that's one of the reasons I asked about state law changes, is we know there's a big discussion going on about fire insurance in the kind of territory that we're in. And one of the things that may come out of that, probably not soon, but at some point, is requirements that in order to get cheap insurance, you have to do certain things to your exterior, possibly put my favorite thing, fire sprinklers on. And if we get something that is, say, we have to replace the exterior cladding, I mean, someday we're going to have to. It's outlived its normal expected life, I think. It's still in good shape as far as I know, but at some point that's going to happen. Well, again, I'm in the little unit with hardly any exterior walls, and I kind of feel like that should be one of those things that's proportionate. I don't have any choice the way this vote is set up, except to vote no, which I probably will. But I think I can see a time, maybe in the next few years, when we might want to revisit this proportional assessment issue for just the special assessments. That's my pitch. And let the board propose something when it's not a clear, even benefit to everybody that, you know, just passes the cost through like we did for windows.
Well, that's entirely possible. Depending on the outcome of this current vote, that could be something the board considers down the line, because right now we're doing a wholesale restatement of the entire CC&Rs and bylaws. But you can always do what are called spot amendments, where you just change one section in the future. So that's always a possibility.
So John, just to be clear, Mark, thanks for bringing that up. I thought from your comments that this applied to the monthly, but not the special assessments, but it would apply to both?
Yes, it applies to both.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there, this is for Mark Hill. You just talked about the windows, and I have an issue with my window as well. If there's any way we could connect, that'd be great. This is Kat Clune.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to do it. You could, I can send you my email address, I guess. I'm not sure how to do it without involving everybody, though.
Yeah, how about this? I'll send you my email through this, the chat. Would that work?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. I'm just not a very sophisticated Zoom user, as you can tell.
Okay, it's in the chat now. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Any other comments? We're right at 6 o'clock. We've been at this for an hour. If there's nothing else here, then I think we're just about done. But that whole point, I knew that the second piece of this thing was going to be the contentious piece. Obviously, the bylaws and the CC&R is not so much there, but when we're talking about cost to individuals, then at that point, people want to talk about that a little bit and understand it. And kind of like what John was saying is that we try to keep this as clean as possible. There's just two alternative votes. One, keep it the same. The other, change it. And it's up to the membership at that point about what they want to do with it. And it may be something that we do revisit. We heard some good things in here about, you know, if we can kind of spot affect things going in the future without having to do all of this again and going out with the major vote, then maybe we can put out a special vote that says, well, maybe we'll do this, but not for special assessments. Maybe we'll let that be a weighted situation. I can definitely see that. And just for total disclosure, I'm just like Gene. I'm 0.99. I'm a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, so I'm right in the middle. I have no dog in this fight whatsoever in terms of this as being the current president right now. It's something that came up in the 4 years that we were talking about. It was something that was proposed, and we decided to bring that forward and let the membership vote, and we'll let it fall where it falls. So if there's nothing else, then I think we're done. You know, John, thanks for being here and
Actually,
explain all that.
hi, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Kat Clune here. I do have one more thing, and that is property value. And I know that we're talking dollars here, but we are talking dollars here. And that someone who has going to buy my condo is going to look at the fees. And so for especially the one bedrooms, the increase in fees is going to affect the resale value. And I think that is hugely important to consider and not to dismiss. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
And that's why everybody gets their vote.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, John.
Yep,
Oh,
thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Eric.